And today we're going to be hearing a little bit more about the research that Yuting has been doing. And so please join me in welcoming her to present her research.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Sorry, today I have to present with my mask on. It's kind of flu season. And then, yeah, if you want water, just grab one from the back. So I'm really glad that I have the chance to share with you on the research project that me and another ASAM fellow, Ella Yang, say hi, that we've been doing since the beginning of the summer. And then just a little hint, unlike the other fellowships research, what we've been doing is kind of experiment study, meaning that we've been doing an experiment on the populations that we were interested in. So just to give you a little hint of what we're going to cover today, this is the roadmap for today's presentation. First of all, we're going to give a research overview about what we did in the research. And then going back to the first slide is we were implementing a health intervention, which is a traditional medical practice from the ancient Chinese history, and then bringing that to the Chinese immigrants, the older adults of Chinese immigrants in the United States. We were selecting our subjects in Chinatown, in Philadelphia. And then we will briefly go over why we selected this type of health intervention in our populations, and then why we selected these populations as our study subjects, as well as their demographics, and what that means have to do with the implications of our interpretation of the study results. Then we're going to go over the methods that we use, which involves a lot of administration as well as thinking process. We're going to share with our preliminary study results. It's a kind of big data set that we've been recently analyzing on, so it's not a complete result, but then the preliminary results are exciting. And then we will have a little bit of discussion of how we interpret the study results, what does that mean for population, the limitations that we had, and the ethical problems I was thinking about as a person interested in biomedical ethics, and also what's next, people to thank to. And then finally, we're going to have a 4-minute, which is the first half of the health intervention that we've been doing on for our study subjects. And everybody will get up, and then we'll follow the video, and then you'll follow me to do a little demo. Okay. So, can everybody hear me well in the Zoom? Yeah, whatever. Then let's go forward. Okay. So a little bit of overview of the research. Our research question is: can Chinese traditional medical exercise improve the psychosocial well-being among the Chinese immigrants in the US? And then we selected Baduanjin, which is this thing, as a form of Qigong exercise as an example of our health intervention. And then we're going to go over the demographics and as well as the measurements that we use to answer how we know that it's actually improving the psychosocial well-being of our study subjects. Baduanjin, an English version of this is also known as the 8 brocades. Why is it known as this? Is because there are only 8 movements in this exercise. But then the way that a person can practice this exercise is very soft and it's very flowy. So that's how they came with the name of 8 brocades. And then historians have said, oh, it's dated many thousands of years ago, probably 1,000 years ago, and it has been evolutionized throughout the history. Then there have been modifications on people how they did that. There are different segmentations about how people did that in different parts of China, but currently it's not our main interest. We were trying to understand how the characteristics of this type of exercise, which is not only physical, but also spiritual and also martial, because you can not only use this exercise to kind of relieve stress, to have relaxation, but also you can stretch your muscles and you can also strengthen some of the movements that are kind of strenuous, even for young people, I have to say. And the reason why it's spiritual is because it involves mind in the process of practice. And it requires you to focus on what we call qi. So in Chinese medicine, unlike in modern medicine, the unit of analysis in a body is not cell, is not bacteria, it's not these tiny things, it's not the tiny organisms. It's the flow of air in the body. And then we would say, and then in Chinese medicine, they would say, oh, if you have the correct flow of air in your body, it would balance the heat, it will balance the coldness in your body, and it will prevent you from getting sick. So if you don't have a good balance of qi, all kinds of problems will be related. If you have a problem with your liver, oh, that's because you have too much heat, too much fire in your liver, and that's because there's something stuck there. You need to use the flow of qi to kind of relieve that heat. So that's why it involves your mind control of how your qi flows in your body. So it's a combination of your mind exercise as well as the physical exercises. And then by doing a previous literature review, we understood that the practice of Baduanjin is actually very popular among mainland Chinese people back in China. And then there have been abundant research experiments trying to understand, doing the exact same thing that we did, implementing this type of exercise in interested populations and trying to understand, trying to observe if there are benefits. And abundant research shows that there are physical and mental benefits in all kinds of populations, in clinical populations who are hospitalized, and then by doing this type of exercise, they found out that it increases their flexibility and stuff. And the mental benefits also helped. So one of the research one of the research paper that I was reading on was based on how they implemented Baduanjin to women who have been undergoing familial violence, partner violence. And then they found out that it relieves the stress measured by psychological scales, and it also relieves also improves their sleep based on the scale that they did. And so why we selected Baduanjin for this study is because of its benefits. Well, first of all, it is a relatively easy form to learn in Qigong. We know that there are also other types of traditional Chinese practice, for example, Tai Chi, but that is very hard. I haven't even learned it. And then it's very popular, so we suspect that it's easier, it's more accessible for the older adults to get into this. However, in the later part of the presentation, I'll talk about some of the limitations of our study, and the practicality tells us, even when we think about how this exercise is very accessible to a certain population, well, oftentimes it's not accessible to all the populations, but relatively it's a very easy form of practice. And then a little bit of demographics of our population. We were selecting older adult Chinese immigrants in a senior care center in Chinatown, Philadelphia. And then the reason for, we also did follow-up interviews after our intervention to kind of complement our research study. And then a lot of and this is a little hint for next week's presentation by Ella Yang. She will be presenting a lot of the qualitative analysis of our interview and understand how Baduanjin improves community health through a cultural. But getting back to the reasons why they immigrated to the United States, the first reason is they would want to unite with the sons and siblings who have settled in the United States. And then the second most common reason is they wanted to help raise their grandchildren. Their sons and daughters might be busy with work, and they needed people to take care of their grandchildren. So that's why they came to the US and settled. More of this on next week. And then some of the concerns or the things to be worried about our population is, first of all, they have a very high language barrier. Imagine you coming to the US without knowing anything about English, and at your 60s or 70s, it's very hard to communicate. And then for the high cultural barrier, it's also the same. We observe that this community is a very enclosed community. They have a bit of low willingness to integrate to the other US societies. And in the limitations part, we will also talk about what it means for understanding what the meaning of this study is to the immigrant population. We also observed, because it's a very old population, we only selected people who are older than 65 years ago, and the mean age, I think on the next slide, will be something like 75, and then we had several subjects that were over 90 years old. So it's a very old population. They have a lot of health and mental vulnerabilities. So for example, we implemented a psychological sleep scale questionnaire to these older adults, and then we found out in the pre-screening period that 4 out of 5 of them had poor sleep, which is a PSQI score over 5 before the intervention, but that luckily dropped to 3 out of 5 after our intervention. More on this. So speaking of vulnerability, you may say, oh, this is a good justification why we want to implement this health intervention to improve their health. However, it's a very complicated background, because if you consider, like, the people who needed the most help in the immigration population is probably not of that. Why? It's because if we look at the reason for their immigration, they have a safety net, which is their sons and their siblings and their daughters who have settled in the United States who could take care of them. And because it's a very enclosed community, they have a lot of help within the community. So, and then we also observed various education levels, and then their sons and daughters, because they were able to settle in the United States through their work, they had relatively high socioeconomic status. So as our, a little bit of demographics data can show that we see that the education level is kind of very even, and then we also have a relatively high proportion of people who have attended college universities in back in China. Some of them are even college professors, very interesting people. But then we also see it's a very complicated demographics in saying that 60% of them are currently living with a partner, and then 40% of them are either widows or they have divorced. Our population is primarily female, and that means in interpreting our results, that might have to do with the limitation of who our study subject is and how can we apply the intervention to a larger population. So we had 78 people on our attendance list. So what we were doing is when we implement the health intervention, we would call by their names and then make sure that took their attendance. But then some of the older adults, they have their own business to do. They need to grocery shopping. They need to get their acupuncture. So not a lot of them completed all the survey and computerized cognitive tests. And so to the method section, what we did for this study came in 4 steps. The first is like administrative stuff. We went through the institutional review board for the ethics. And then this part, me and Ella, we were the first time going through this process, and it made us reflect a lot about how we want to benefit our community and how we want to think about the significance of our study. And so what we started first is through community engagement. We were actively talking with the community leader in the senior care center and trying to understand what they wanted from us and what we could provide to them, as well as what we wanted from them, recruitment. And then it's also a process of building trust and just, mingling with the older adults and see and hear, understand their demographics, knowing their lives, knowing their pain points, right? And then oh, sorry, I forgot the literature review. Literature review is really important in our study is because when we are trying to understand how strong or how intense our intervention should be for our populations, we need to rely on existing data. And then existing data, some of them range from 4 weeks to 8 weeks to 10 weeks, some of them range to 6 months. And so we decided to implement the study for 10 weeks. And then for each week, we had 5 days, we would have one of our members go into the senior care center, playing the video and leading the seniors practice the Baduanjin with us. And so, but then it's a relatively short video, so it's 10 minutes every day. But then in this case, I think we successfully built a trustful relationship with our older adults. It's always in person. And then sometimes we would give regular instructions to ensure, the older adults, they kind of get the movements, right? Because if you don't get the movements, right, it's nothing different than stretching out. And then finally, we would be thinking about how do we want to collect data on our subjects. So because we are measuring cycle and social health, we kind of divided into different surveys, different questionnaires. So first we had in-person surveys. Why is it in person? Because some of the older adults, they couldn't read, then they had difficulty understanding and fixing the terms on the questionnaire. So we would be implementing the survey one-on-one with the older adults. That took a long time, but it's fun to hear their stories, and sometimes the questionnaire would take half an hour. And the in-person surveys, they included PSQI, which is Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index. It measures sleep quality, and then OASR, it measures the overall health for older adults. FSS, that is fatigue scale. If you get old, you may feel dizzy the rest of the day, and then you may feel fatigued. So that's a measure of fatigue. Now we also had 3 computers running the computerized cognitive test. This is the fun part. We would be telling the older adults, what you're going to do is basically games, because it's also games for us. PVT, that's psychomotor vigilance test. That is testing your vigilance, which is response speed. So on the computer screen, you would have a stimuli, and once you see the stimuli, you need to click, and then it would record the response time that it took you to reply to the stimuli. So how fast your brain is, how fast and how well can you maintain attention to a stimuli. And then the memory is, we were giving them photos, and then after a round of showing them the photos, we're going to ask them, have you seen these pictures? Short-term memory, and also risk behavior. We're asking them to blow a balloon, but if the balloon gets too big, it will pop. So trying to understand whether the risk behavior has something to do with their age and stuff. And then finally, we were doing interviews, asking them about what's their perception on Baduanjin, how they interpret it, whether they were going to take it, whether they were going to practice it on their own after our intervention, and how they interpret it with their self-identification as older adult Chinese immigrants. Ella will cover this next week. Okay, and so let's get to the results part. So our preliminary results, we ran statistical analysis on several of the scales. So, so the median response time and the median response speed are measurements in the vigilance test, which is testing you how fast can you respond to a stimuli, as well as how well can you maintain your attention to a stimuli. And then the PSQI, which is the sleep, FSS is just fatigue. Oh, sorry, I put it on. And the hit rate is a measurement of the memory. Is it's measuring how, like, what is the percentage of the pictures that you got right, that you correctly clicked, that you have seen before. And on the left side, we have the chart for the absolute effect size. This is measuring, okay, let's first take a look at the p-values of each test. So we were taking 95% of confidence interval, and then if the p-value is lower than 0.05, we would say, okay, we believe there is a real significant statistical difference in our study. And then on the left side, which is the absolute effect size, is trying to understand, okay, this significance, is it like what is the effect size of it in the general population? Is it a very small difference, or is it a big enough difference that we can have kind of a real life implication on the entire population? And then for the on the four statistical analysis that we did, we all observed very low p-value, saying the result is pretty significant. We observed a lot of significant improvement before the intervention and after the intervention on all of the scales that we did, which is sleep, and then vigilance, fatigue, and memory. And then the absolute effect size, so the way you interpret it is, so these two columns with 0.8%, meaning this is a very high effect size, is saying a significance difference, it's big, it's something. However, in the limitation, we will also talk about how do you interpret that? Is it possibly because the older adults are simply more familiar with the test itself, so they know how to respond to the stimuli better? And then for the fatigue scale, which is 0.6, is just like moderate to high effect sizes, say, okay, we are more confident in saying, okay, the reduction in their fatigue after the intervention is something that we should seriously consider. The more moderate effect sizes for the sleep and then the memory, and then that might have something to do with memory is not something that you can improve immediately. However, fatigue and sleep and then your vigilance, your attention could be something that's very dependent on your mood that could be changed in a very short term. So that's how we kind of interpret why they have different effect sizes. And then what we're going to do later is we're going to finish the statistics analysis for the other tests we haven't done, but we look forward to it. And then we also did several small questionnaires to the older adults. So the SWLS, which is the life satisfaction scale, and we saw something really interesting in that the mentality of the older adults, they might be very different from what we expected. So for this scale, if you score something above 25 to 30, that means you're pretty satisfactory with your life. You're pretty satisfied with your life. If you score over 30, that means you're very satisfied with your life. And then we observed that among all the age populations, we see most of the adults, they're pretty satisfied with their life or whatever. And this is consistent with our interview data. And then when we're doing an in-person surveys, we were asking them about some of the questions that we ticked, and then they would say, oh, I've already accepted life as it is. And it has important implications to how we want to understand how we should help these populations and how these populations should be viewed, right? And then for the SHMS, that is the sub-health measurement scale version, the higher score you get on this scale, that means the better overall health you are, regardless of your age. And then we see a significant decrease in that, in the overall health. So the preliminary results told us that we are pretty confident in our intervention, that it's helpful and effective in improving the multiple aspects of health in our populations. But we also observe a very interesting observation, which is there is a little to moderate dose response effect. as I mentioned before, we were taking attendance of the older adults and trying to understand if there is a relationship between the times, the number of times that you attended the intervention and the improvement that you got. And then we didn't find a lot of effect, to be honest. So on this graph, it's the x-axis is attendance. The more rightward you are towards this x-axis means you attended most of our interventions. And then the y-axis is the fatigue scale improvement. The higher you are upon the y scale means the more reduction you get on your fatigue, the more improvement you have on your fatigue. And then the graph is kind of, honestly, is kind of random, saying there is no direct relationship between how many times you attended our Baduanjin exercise and how much improvement you get. And what does that mean? That means there is something else other than attendance that is working in Baduanjin that is improving the population health. That might not have something to do with how many times you stretch your muscles. It might be something that's cultural. That might be something that's social. That may be something that's cognitive. How you understand Baduanjin, how you perceive yourself as a participant in a community exercise may have effect on your health. So analysis process, why would I do this? It's because data analysis was a pain for me, and then I spent too many hours on this, and I would regret it if I don't have you go through this with me. So this is a screenshot of SPSS, which is the statistical analysis tool that I was using. And so what we were doing is, because we were asking questions about, okay, this is a demographics question, but we were asking them, for example, does exercise bring you fatigue? Is fatigue a major trouble for you in life? And then they would say, to some extent I agree, I don't agree, I strongly agree. And then we have to convert their answers to a specific number, which is, okay, how much do you score on the fatigue scale? And then we would compare these scores with their post-test and then try and understand if there was a reduction in the point that they got. So the first step we do is we're trying to recode the scale by bringing the relevant questions and then recode things. Okay. So this is the recode part. This is saying I agree very much. I strongly agree, and then we would recode it as 7. This is saying I strongly disagree, and we recode it to 1. And then we add all these codes of all the questions up together, and then we would get a result of, for example, this is the question of whether you agree that exercise will make you more fatigued. And this is the response. Some of them strongly agree, some of them would be like, I know exercise is not a big thing for me. And then finally, you would calculate the entire score for a person about how much score does this person get on the fatigue scale by adding up all the points that he or she got from all these fatigue-related questions. You would add them up, which is 9 points, all them add together, and then you will get a score of fatigue scale score. And then you would do paired t-test. For example, this column here is the pre-intervention scores that our older adults got on the fatigue scale, and then this column is the score that they got after the intervention. And you would do the same thing to the other questionnaires, such as PSQI, which is related to sleep, and then you would do this to the memory, you would do this to the vigilance, and this is also vigilance. And you would compare these and say, okay, there's a major reduction in all of the subjects that we observe, and so we believe that there is a improvement in their health. Okay, so discussion. So our preliminary data shows that there are significant results in their improvement in health in many aspects, and it is complemented by our interview data, which I will cover in a minute. And then we also understood that Baduanjin is proven to be a very feasible community health intervention. You don't need a lot of setup to do this, and it's relatively easy to learn, which we will demonstrate in a minute. It's very cost effective. You don't need a lot of stuff. There are multiple tutorial videos, and it's very safe. We didn't observe any adverse events. And then we also told the older adults, if you don't feel comfortable in doing that, just stop, just stand for a minute. And then sometimes they would be very flexible. Sometimes they would be, okay, I'm gonna sit for a little fun, right? But it's also very fun to engage in because in our interview data, we ask them, hey, are you still doing Baduanjin exercise after we ended the intervention? They'd be like, yeah, I would do this, maybe not in the bathroom, but then after I got home, before I got a shower, or after I got a shower, things like that. And then, so we were thinking about, okay, if a traditional medical exercise can improve community health in immigrants, is it possible that you extend such interventions to other immigrant populations? I mean, so the more direct one would be, okay, how do we implement maybe another traditional Chinese medical practice to other, for example, younger Chinese immigrant populations? And to a wider generation would be, okay, how do you implement, for example, a traditional Vietnamese medical exercise to Vietnamese immigrants in the United States? And then if you do this, you may be able to see, okay, something about traditional medical exercise. Maybe it's about the cultural part that is acting in improving the health of these communities because they have they identify with it, right? And the little cute pictures. This is the older adults doing computerized tests. This is the vigilance test. The stimuli is actually the numbers which will report the response time that it took you to respond. And this is my water bottle, and they were doing the questionnaires over there. Okay, and so we did a little interview for our study subjects. Oh, guess whose this is?
You.
No, this is not me. It's Ilya, right? Iconic cat. Okay. Right. What was I saying? Oh, the interview data. We were asking them about, okay, how you felt after you had the intervention. What do you think that about Baduanjin that helped you improve your health? And they correspond with our statistical data. So we asked them about the reasons for wanting to join. Oh, it's actually in my slider notes, but one of the reasons they want to join is they have heard of it once since they were in China, but they never knew how to do it because some of them have issues with using the phone, and they don't have someone that has been practicing this type of Qigong around them. So after they heard this opportunity, hey, there will be a tutorial for you, there will be a study experiment for you, and then you will be able to practice with your peers for 5 days a week, and then for 10 weeks. They say, yeah, it's a good idea. And some of them haven't heard of it, but they know it's kind of good because it's their understanding of traditional medical practice is good, so they're more willing to accept this. And this is also, I think, the major reason why our intervention proves to be very feasible in implementing. And then the self-identified benefits and the medical and the physical mechanism that we had in our interview is, well, first of all, one, this is a madam with high blood pressure. She would say, oh, it actually helped with my blood circulation. She used to feel like her feet were very cold before the intervention, but now after she got more exercise, she feel like, oh, I don't feel that much of heat in my feet. I don't feel that much coldness in my feet. So like exercise will help you to increase your blood circulation. And then we had another female respondent who has been dealing with her husband who had Alzheimer's, and she says, it's very depressing, it's very tiring. And then she says, like, forgetting about all of these and then just practicing with your peers in a community exercise it really can improve your mood because by listening to the serene music and then breathing in and breathing out, as you will feel in a moment, you forget about everything and just be in the moment. So it's good for your mood. And then for another respondent, she says, well, the impact of improving your mood is kind of low to moderate, but he still enjoys doing it. And then the third way that Baduanjin can improve health is through relaxation. Two of our respondents, they had arthritis, and they were saying, oh, Tai Chi is too hard because it requires you to do some kind of very aerobatic movements. But then for Baduanjin, it's actually very relaxing. And it moves your joints in a moderate level so that it's good for your arthritis, but it doesn't hurt your knees. And of course, it involves a lot of muscle stretching and tendons. And then lastly, they said, oh, it increases your flexibility. One of our respondents, she said, I couldn't move my neck around before the intervention. And after the intervention, she feel like, oh, I can move my neck around. Because in one of the movements, they were literally asking you, hey, look from behind, right? Like, look behind. So yeah, so it's good for the joint and arthritis. And then some of the limitations that we observe in our study is, well, unfortunately, we don't have a control group. So, and then because in a senior care center, they had many other ongoing activity. So we don't know if there's a combined effect of simply doing more exercise is good for your health. And then second is we observe some confounding variables. For example, we observe the effect size of improvement in the vigilance computerized test for these older adults. It's very big. And we suspect it's mainly because they grew more familiar with how they use the computer, how they click, how they look at the stimuli throughout time. And so they understood, okay, well, I clicked. And so they responded faster. So it might be because of that. And the third is our population is kind of biased. So because we were voluntarily asking, hey, do you want to join us? Hey, do you want to join us? And in the senior care center, it's a whole world, it's a whole universe of people. Some people just don't want to talk to you. They want to be minding their own business, playing mahjong all over the table. They don't want to talk to you. So our population is generally very active and willing to try new things. And that is a limitation in our understanding of if we want to implement relevant interventions to future populations, how do we let people who simply don't want to talk to you get involved and trying to get them into good things. And then the fourth one is because we only did the intervention for like 10 weeks, we didn't know whether they would have a long-term effect. And if it were to have a long-term effect, it will probably be dependent on they have to do the exercise on their own, right? And the other is we don't know the benefits of Baduanjin exercise compared to other health interventions. Because generally, aerobics exercise will improve your health, but is it something specific about Baduanjin that improves your health, right? And then the other thing is it applicable to other Chinese immigrant populations? So in the middle of the study, me and Ella, we were going to the North Philadelphia trying to recruit, not older adults of Chinese immigrant adults and trying to understand if they also wanted to be part of the study and if they could also benefit from that. We didn't know because people may have different understandings, people may have different identification of themselves as well as their relationship with traditional medical practice. Some people who think that Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese medicine is pseudoscience may simply think, no, this is trash. I would go with modern science. I would do my aerobics, right? But however, in our interview data, as well as in Ella's next week's presentation, we observed something that's very specific and unique about Baduanjin compared to other aerobics is that it's a very comprehensive, it's not only a health intervention per se, it's not a medical intervention per se. It is a cognitive and cultural activity which comprehensively improves your health. It not only improves your health by flexing your knees and improving your joints performance, but it also helps you get more involved with your community, and it pulls you in because you understand, you identify with this type of medical exercise, and you engage yourself as well as the community while you are doing this type of exercise. It's feasible, it's safe, it's effective because of the multiple characteristics of Baduanjin per se. It's not about the exercise per se. And then I would like to reflect on some of the ethical issues that I had in this study. The first of all is about the accessibility. As I mentioned, we believe that Baduanjin is very safe, it's very easy to use, it's very easy to learn. So we thought that it's very accessible to our older adults. However, we observed that in the senior care center, there was this population who only speak Cantonese, and then unfortunately, none of our team members spoke Cantonese, and that we were basically unable to communicate with them. It's very sad because they were able to participate in interventions with us. They were able to follow our instructions in the video tutorial, but they were not able to understand when I say breathe in, breathe out, and they were not able to participate in the questionnaire, the computerized test. So this is an unfortunate, big limitation of our study. And then also we were also saying, because we implemented this intervention through an institution, through a senior care center, what about the people that are completely non-institutionalized? What about people that are just wondering, have absolute no social resources? How is it possible to get access to these populations if we want to do the same, right? It's very hard. And then the second point is, when we're thinking about the benefits to the study subjects, we were saying, okay, if we cannot guarantee a long-term effect, long-term benefits to these populations, and they were only benefiting like short-term wise out of curiosity, out of this short-term community engagement, and then they were back to their old life after this intervention, is it really something that's worth doing to these populations? And so what we're trying to do is we were trying to establish continued engagement with each senior care center who were doing volunteers over there, and we also established a personal contact with some of our older adults after the study. And then third, we would also tell the senior care center to continue play the video instructions of Baduanjin. And then in interview data, 2 of our respondents said that, sometimes they would do it at home, but oftentimes they would request the staff at the senior care center to play the video. And then because the video is on, lots of people started doing that, even without like personal instructions. And then third is, how do we interpret this, our study benefits in greater populations? So first of all, I was thinking about where should our research resources go? As I mentioned, even this type of intervention that try to be accessible to all is not accessible to a lot of people. And if we're trying to do the best, if we're trying to help the most vulnerable populations, should we be targeting some other populations? And then the second is because our subjects have like safety nets, and then they have an enclosed community, they have a very low willingness to integrate in United societies. So when thinking about, okay, what is the best way to help these populations? We were thinking about, should we kind of hint them towards, there is a way for you to contribute to your community, to maybe be part of the United States if you want to. Should resources be directed to break their unwillingness to integrate in American society as a paternalistic advice? These are hard questions. I haven't completely thought all of them. I haven't done enough research about it. But I think it's really important to keep in mind as a resource, because we have limited resource for research. We want to do the maximum good, and we have to be careful about what are the populations we're trying to select, what kind of benefit we want to bring. And then, and then what's next? Oh, this is a picture then me. Ella refused to take the picture with me. I don't know why. But then we were in North Philadelphia trying to recruit adult Chinese immigrants to see if we can do the same thing. We were doing volunteer there. But then for what's next, first of all, the most immediate thing, finish data analysis for other questionnaires. And then to improve the study design, we might recruit a control group in another senior care center or in the same senior care center to see if our community intervention really helped. And then also to expand other populations, but that might require, changing the traditional medical exercise into something that's more helpful, something that's more beneficial to the targeted population. And then just a bunch of people to thank to. I really thank ASAM community, is because it's a really fun learning experience. I was not only able to do my research and then get paid to pay my subjects, but also I was able to listen to other fellows' research presentations. It was like, this is amazing. And then I would also like to thank the participants and the community leaders in the senior care center, and our 2 professors who have been directing our research throughout the process, and then our multiple team members. This is actually a dinner at one of our professors' house. She's an amazing cook. I wish I could cook this well, but I have hot pot, I mean, that makes myself a good cook, but necessarily I don't cook. And then friends, yes, that I'm talking about. Okay, so a little demonstration of our health intervention. Everybody gets up and then gets a place. And then Ella will be giving you a bit of instruction on how to play it.
I need to go to the bathroom. I can more exercise.
Yes. Oh, ready?
Huh?
You guys gotta get into it.
How do you get large?
Oh my god. That's scary. Like people out.
Silence! It's about serenity. It's not about. Okay, you can all follow me. Ella's gonna be. Place your hands in front of your stomach. You'll feel all the heat concentrated in your stomach. Then you'll feel serenity and peace. Don't laugh. I'm talking about you. Knees bent for a little bit. Yeah. This is called.
This is called, in English, this is called 2 hands hold up to the heavens. The translation sometimes doesn't make sense, but it's the best that we have.
Stretch as high as you can, and then stretch as far as you can. Knees bent. Look up to the sky, and lower your shoulder. Okay. Okay, we have limited space, but try your best. It's gonna, repeat for 8 times. So it's a bit boring if you don't concentrate, but if you concentrate, it's fun.
simply means to go up, and then the next instruction basically means to go down.
下落，上坡，左右
Okay, we're moving to our second movement, which is called.
Drawing the bow to shoot the eagle.
Okay, follow me, okay? Follow me. Because the videos aren't that instructive. Yes.
Like to shoot the eagle.
搭话，
You're preparing
Put
to
your
shoot
wrists
the
together
eagle.
and then to shoot. The hand is like this. Like this.
And you are.
搭话，开弓，
Stretch your arms, stretch your fingers. Feel the heat flow into your fingers.
It's really getting me.
开弓，
Do you feel the chest opening up?
It's open.
开弓，
And then when you're stretching out your arms, you should look at your hand.
Yeah.
Look
Look at
there.
where you aim, you know?
位，虚干，
Okay, so next move. Okay, let me see what it's called. Okay, the translation says it's called separate heaven and earth. I have no idea what that means, but basically just
上，
use your single arm to go up and down.
Why is Ellen having Ella should do this, yes.
I will, but I have to give instructions. I will do the second part next week.
Yes, she will do the second part.
So come back.
Yes.
上， 下，
Stretch your shoulders and your back. Do you feel anything? If you don't feel anything, you're doing it wrong. It's not my fault. Angela's doing it very right. Do you want to join me? Yes. Okay, we're gonna look behind. Okay, we're gonna move our neck.
起身，后脚，转正，起身，
Very slow. Imagine you're a turtle. You're trying to understand what's on your back.
正，
Okay, come to the front.
后
Move
脚，
upwards. Look behind.
转正，起身，后脚，转正，起身，后脚，转正，起身，后脚，摇头摆尾。
Okay, this is the fun part. But next week. So, what is it? Oh, okay. Final part. Do you have any questions for the research in the entire thing? Any questions or thoughts to share? Yes, please.
I noticed that it's hard to include a control group because it have a small sample size and whatnot.
using like different like scratching.
Oh, okay, yeah. So in the previous studies that were existing, never mind. Well, since nobody is listening, okay. So yeah, in the previous studies in mainland China, there were a bunch of randomized controlled trials. Some of them would compare Baduanjin to no intervention absolutely at all, like regular life. Some of them would compare this to, for example, community reading intervention that educates about health interventions. Some of them would compare Baduanjin as a complementary medical intervention plus regular therapy versus regular therapy to see if Baduanjin adds extra benefit. Surprisingly, all of them have extra benefits. So yes, but it also could be, publication bias. People don't publish no results, so it could be.
So you're familiar, like as you just said, you're pretty familiar with like the literature on Baduanjin in like mainland China, and I know you talked about it's kind of like almost like a cultural pathway and like a cognitive pathway that like people see benefits from doing the exercise. So I was kind of wondering, like, I guess like cross culturally, like mainland China versus like Chinese immigrants, like if there are kind of like differences you've noticed, like in how they benefit from it, or like if they experience benefits from it, maybe like having to do with immigration and like the displacement from culture.
Okay, I can answer you the part on mainland China, and then I'll leave the rest of the question to Ella for next week's presentation because she's an expert in that. So in the randomized control trials that we observed, that we read for the mainland Chinese, they were not doing things based on how does Baduanjin improve your self-identification as a Chinese. I mean, they're living in a community. A lot of them don't have identification crisis. But a lot of them do have like mental crisis. For example, I was experiencing partnership violence. I was experiencing downsides because of the illness and stuff. So it was not culturally relevant improvements in health as well as mental health. But then in our population, just to give you a little hint of what Ella will observe, it does help with their self-identification as immigrants. So a resurrection about how they think about themselves, how they establish their identities in the United States. And it also gives them a little hint about what they can do to actually be reintegrated, not be reintegrated, to integrate in the wider community that they're currently in.
This is less of a question, more of a observation that might, I don't know, hopefully inspire you and Ella in your future endeavors with this project. And it's related to the previous question. One of my professors in undergrad, before he retired, he ran this Tai Chi workshop on campus, and it attracted like a large crowd, like from the undergrads, faculty, grad students, staff, of all different backgrounds. He's Chinese American. Hoping to, I think there's potential there.
Yeah.
Thanks for your presentation.
Yeah, we're also trying to see, because this is more of like a feasibility experiment, trying to understand if it's feasible to implement in populations. And gladly we found, yes, it is very feasible.
So just for clarification, was not having done this particular form of Qigong beforehand one of the requirements for entering the study?
Yes, so none of them like had a very overall understanding of what Qigong is.
You measure like any previous familiarity with things like Tai Chi or other, or
some of them have practiced Tai Chi, but we also observed that during the process of our intervention, there was no comparable ongoing exercise in the senior care center. So we were not competing against any other Tai Chi exercise in the senior care center. We were the only mysterious exercise group in the senior care center at the time.
Yuting, thank you so much. This was so fabulous and so interesting, and I'm looking forward to Ella's continued talk next week. So I just had a question. Do the members live near the center?
Yes, some of them, yes, most of them are living in senior apartments near the center.
Nearby.
But they were distributed, some of them are living in West Philly actually. So they were living in senior apartments across Philadelphia, but most of them are living nearby the senior care center.
Okay. And then, so this population is sort of self-selected, right? Like, okay, and so, how does one, I mean, the questions on how satisfied you are, and they seem to be pretty satisfied, but they're already engaged, kind of, right, in this center. How do you define like how satisfied you are? Like how do I? Like, I'm trying to think, how satisfied am I? Like is there a scale or is there questions?
Yeah. So we had a psychological scale on the satisfactory day. So for example, one of the question is, if you were to live your life again, would you change a lot of things in your life? Do you think by far you have gained the most important things you have in your life? And someone would be like, yeah. And then one of the question would be, how worried are you about getting old? They'd be like, I'm old, I don't care. So it's kind of more subjective scales questions.
And what's the population most? You probably mentioned this if I missed it.
Older adult Chinese immigrants.
No, but like older meaning what? 55
over
to 75?
over 65. Over 65. Yes.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Ryan has a question.
I have a question regarding like your gender breakdown. I think you said that it was like 93% female.
Yes.
I'm just wondering if you had any like explanation idea of why that was.
Okay. Yes. This is a very interesting observation. So one of the reasons that we spotted is because we believe that females are more willing to engage in community exercise than male. And then because one of the community leaders that we were in contact with in the senior care center was a female, and then she was like actively asking her female friends about whether they wanted to be a part of this thing. So we definitely observed that there's a gender difference in willingness to participate in stuff, and I believe it's parallel to other studies in the same field as well.
Would you say the barrier to entry for, men of the same cohort or males of the same cohort is higher than for female population?
I mean, for them, I don't think the barrier is any higher. A lot of the men, for example, a lot of the residents in the senior care center, when they were doing stuff non-related to exercise, for example, sitting down, playing mahjong at the table, reading newspaper, writing calligraphy, they were male most of the time. The most active residents in the senior care center, dancing, doing exercise, go shopping, grocery, they're all female. So I would say, like, for them, there is no barrier to entry, but there might be a preference difference. And then for us, yeah, of course, it's a great barrier to try to recruit male participants. But we also observe, okay, go ahead.
I would just add on to that, I think for the demographics of the senior center itself, there are just one. That's another, not that extreme, but generally there are more females.
Is the Baduanjin study still like going on? Right.
We ended the intervention so that we collected the data and then trying to compare the data between But then in our interview data, we asked them about whether you are still doing Baduanjin on your own. They said yes. Some of them said yes, and some of them said yes. Like oftentimes I would ask people in the senior care center to play the video so that me and my other friends we could follow.
Do you have plans to go back? I'm sure they must miss you and Ella.
Yes, we would go back like once a month or something to talk, and then yes.
Any last questions or thoughts? Thank you.
Okay.